He did not wait a day. He did not wait an hour. He did not even wait until the anesthesia wore off. 47 minutes after his wife gave birth to twins, Chief Tobe Ease walked into the recovery suite at Reddington Hospital and dropped a divorce envelope on her bed. He told her she came from nothing. He told her she would leave with less. He did not know about the contract she had signed 5 days earlier in Zurich. 750 billion naira. By Friday, the man who thought he was leaving her would be the one who lost everything. If you love stories about quiet women who win loud, hit that subscribe button right now and tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from. Type one word, witness, so I know you are here. Now, back to Suite 4111. At the moment, the door closed behind him. The babies had been born at 3:14 in the morning by emergency cesarean. The boy first blew around the lips, requiring 2 minutes of suction before his first cry came. The girl second, 3 minutes later, 6 pounds even, pink, oscillant, and breathing on her own. The surgical team had wheeled Dr. Nneka Obi-Eze into Recovery Suite 4011 at Reddington Hospital on Victoria Island at 3:48 that morning. Her blood pressure had crashed twice during surgery, and the anesthesiologist had been forced to push magnesium hard into the second drip to stop a seizure he could see coming in her tracings. By 4 o'clock, she was conscious enough to know the babies were alive. She did not know much else. The nurse by her bed was Sister Tolasani, 22 years in maternity at Reddington, the kind of woman who could tell from across a corridor whether a mother was going to recover well or badly. She had been counting the boy's breathing by fives since the moment they put him in the warming cot. She had not slept in 18 hours, and she did not intend to until both of these babies were stable. At 4 o'clock and 1 minute past, Chief Tobe Ease walked into the room. He carried no flowers. He carried a brown manila envelope. He set it on the rolling tray between the untouched water cup and the surgical consent form Nneka had signed at 12:20 that morning, when the doctors said the boy was in fetal distress, and she had 2 minutes to decide. Sister Tola straightened from the monitor. "Good morning, sir. Madame is still recovering." The doctors said, "Thank you, sister. I will only take a moment." He turned to his wife. Her left hand was on her daughter's swaddled body. Her right hand could not have closed if she had ordered it to. The magnesium had taken it. "Are you awake enough to sign?" For a long second, she could not understand the words. Her vision was still soft at the edges from the morphine push the anesthesiologist had ordered when she started shaking on the table. "Sign what? It is what it looks like." He stood at the foot of her bed with his hands in his trouser pockets, the way he stood when he was waiting for a junior partner to finish a presentation he had already decided he did not like. "Tobe, I just had the children. I cannot even sit up. Where is your mother?" "Where is?" "My mother sent her driver to bring her in the morning. I came myself because I thought you deserved that much." "Last respect, Nneka. Take it." He flicked the envelope once. The sound was very small in the room. "Sign tonight and we make this clean. Make me wait, and tomorrow morning my lawyer files at Ikoyi High Court, and by Friday you read your own divorce in the Punch. My babies were born this morning. Children are resilient. They will not remember." "I will? Good. Maybe you will finally accept the truth." His eyes ran the length of her body, the way a buyer inspects a vehicle whose lease he is about to terminate. The IV, the gown that had ridden up over the dressing on her abdomen, the cotton blanket with the smear of dried blood near her hip from where the surgical team had not quite finished cleaning her up before they wheeled her out. "You came into my world with a degree from a state university and a dead brother you used to make speeches at. I gave you the easy name. I gave you a house in Banana Island and a passport that opens borders. What did you give me back? 8 years of basement experiments and 1 cesarean. Do not pretend you do not know what this paper says." The monitor beeped twice. The drip clicked once. Sister Tola, who had been about to speak, did not. "I Loved you, Nneka said. She did not cry. She had used up all the crying somewhere between the operating room and the recovery room, and she could not find any of it now. Love does not build legacies, Tobe said. Vision does. You have neither. 48 hours, Nneka. Sign it. Or I take the children and the house and what is left of your name, and we will see what you have to fight me with. The door clicked shut behind him. Sister Toila did not move for 90 seconds. Then she walked very slowly across the room. She picked up the manila envelope. She set it on the bedside table on the side furthest from the babies so that her patient would not have to look at it while she was holding her own children. That was all the help she could give. She did not know it yet, but later that morning, before her shift ended at 6, she would walk down 2 flights of stairs to the hospital's medico-legal office, and she would file a written incident report describing what she had just seen. She would describe the time. She would describe the medications the patient was on. She would describe the exact words used by the patient's husband. And that single piece of paper, filed in the hospital's record system at 6:14 on the morning of November the 18th, would be the first weapon Nneka Obi-Eze did not know she already had. Nneka, lying in that bed, did not know about the incident report yet. She knew only that her son was breathing in the cot, that her daughter was warm against her chest, and that a man who had once told her her mind was the most beautiful thing about her had just looked at her like she was an account to close. She did not cry. She closed her eyes, and in the dark behind her eyelids, she counted. She counted the days back to August 4th, when she had signed the indemnity for her husband's loan at Stanbic IBTC. She counted the days back to October 2nd, when she had flown to Zurich for the final round of negotiations with Helvetica Genomics. She counted the days back to last Saturday morning at 11:47 Lagos time, when 3 lawyers in 3 different time zones had countersigned the licensing contract for the work she had been doing in the basement of the house. Tobe had just threatened to take from her 750 billion Naira. A figure that, when she had first seen it on the term sheet in October, had made her quietly excuse herself to a Zurich bathroom and stand at the sink for 4 minutes without moving. She opened her eyes. The boy was asleep in the cot. The girl was asleep on her chest. The envelope sat on the table on the side of the bed furthest from her children, exactly where Sister Tola had moved it. She looked at the ceiling tile directly above her head and counted the holes in it. There were 42. She closed her eyes again, and she decided what she was going to do. 2 floors below the recovery suite, in the rear of a black Range Rover parked under the visitor's awning, a woman named Said Coker was scrolling through her phone and waiting. She had not gone up to the 4th floor. She had read the situation correctly. Being seen at the hospital was bad strategy. She was 29 years old. She had an MBA from Lagos Business School. She had been formally hired by Eze Energy 4 months earlier as head of strategy. She was wearing ivory and gold like she had dressed for a wedding, and she was waiting for the husband of the woman in Suite 4011 to come down and take her to a celebratory breakfast at the Eco Hotel. Toby A had told her he was going up alone for one reason: dignity. He was a businessman. He did not do hospital scenes. He would hand over the papers, deliver the news in 5 clean minutes, and come back down. It was a beautiful plan. It had only one small problem. Tobe Eze had never read his own indemnity. The first visitor the next morning was Madame Gozi Eze. She arrived at Reddington at 9 o'clock, driven in by Bashir, the family driver who had been with the Ezes for 19 years, and who knew, the way servants know things, that the woman in the back seat had not slept. She was wearing white lace Ankara with a navy Jill wrapped twice around her head, and she had come without flowers. The way the women of her generation had been taught, it was vulgar to bring flowers into a maternity ward as if the patient required cheering up. She walked into Suite 4011 the way she walked into every room she entered, which was to say she did not so much enter rooms as occupy them. Where are they? Sister Tola, who had stayed past the end of her shift to watch the babies, looked up. "Good morning, Madame. Where are the children, please?" Tola gestured to the warming cot. Madame Gozi crossed the room, looked down at the two small bodies, and made a single soft sound in her throat that meant nothing in particular, but had the texture of approval. She did not touch them. Nneka. Nneka opened her eyes. The morphine had been stepped down at 6. The pain was returning in slow tides, but her mind was clearer than it had been the night before. "Good morning, Mama. How are you?" "I am managing, Mama." Madame Gozi sat down in the visitor's chair without being offered, the way her son had stood without being asked. She arranged her geal with one practiced hand. She did not ask about the surgery. She did not ask whether the doctors had told her anything about future pregnancies. She did not ask whether the children had fed. Tobe was here last night. He was. He told me what he came to say. You will sign the papers. It was not a question." Nneka watched the older woman's face, 67 years old, skin the color of polished walnut, eyes that had been famous in Onitsha society in the 70s for their length and the way they could close a conversation without a word. The same eyes Tobe had, the same chin. "Mama, I have just had the children. Yes, I see them. I cannot make legal decisions in this condition. You can sign your name, Nneka. It is 2 letters, an apostrophe, and another 4. We are not asking you to perform surgery on yourself. Mama, listen to me, my daughter. The word my daughter did its small, terrible work, the way it always had. Madame Gozi only used it when she was about to say something that would not be a kind thing. You have been a Eze for 8 years. You have eaten in this family. You have slept under this family's roof. You have visteknotes. You have driven this family's cars. You have worn the necklace I gave you on your wedding day, the pearl one my own mother gave me when I married Tobe's father. Do you remember that necklace?" "I remember it, Mama. I gave it to you because I believed, against my own good sense, that you would build something inside our family that was worth keeping. I gave it to you because Toby asked me to give it to you. I gave it to you because I trusted him." She paused. "It is in the house, in your dressing room, in the top drawer of the Burr walnut cabinet. Yes, you will pack it up before you leave the house. You will put it in a small velvet pouch, and you will give it to Bashir on your way out. He will return it to me. You will not need it where you are going. And it does not belong to women who are no longer easy women." The drip clicked once. "And the children? What about the children?" "They are my grandchildren. They carry the easy name. They will be raised in the way my own sons were raised. I will discuss arrangements with Toby, and we will inform you of what is best for them." "Mama, they are nursing. They are I am aware of how old they are, Nneka. I am 67. I have raised 4 sons of my own, and I am not having a conversation with you about feeding schedules. I am having a conversation with you about the boundary of what you have been part of and what you are about to no longer be part of." Sister Tolasani, by the wall, did something then that she would remember for the rest of her career. She did not move. She did not speak. She did, very slowly and very carefully, reach up and tap the small button on the lapel of her uniform that activated the voice recorder she had been wearing for safeguarding purposes ever since her hospital adopted the policy 3 years earlier. The light turned green. It would stay green for the next 11 minutes. "Mama," Nneka said. Her voice was steady now, in a way that had nothing to do with strength. It had to do with a switch that had finally been thrown inside her. "I will not be signing today. You will sign today. I will not be signing today, and I will not be discussing custody arrangements today, and I will not be packing necklaces today. Today I am going to nurse my children. Tomorrow I am going to nurse my children. The day after, the doctors will discharge me, and I will go home to my house in Banana Island, and I will nurse my children there. After that, what happens, happens. But today, Mama, I am going to ask you, with all the respect I can find in this body, to leave my room." The drip clicked once. Madame Gozi did not move. For 10 long seconds she did not move. Then she stood up. She adjusted her geal. She looked once, very briefly, at the warming cot, and then she walked to the door and opened it. She paused at the threshold. You came from a village that nobody outside Anambra has ever heard of. We made you visible. We made you a person people speak to when they meet you. Do not forget what you were before. She left. The door closed. Sister Tola, by the wall, tapped her lapel a second time. The light went off. She walked over to the bed and put a hand on Nneka's shoulder. She did not speak. Nneka closed her eyes. She had grown up in a two-room house in Nnewi with a corrugated iron roof that leaked during the rains. Her father, Sunday Obi, sold electrical parts at the spare parts market on Edo Ezemui Road. Her mother, Beatrice, ran a small provisions stall in the same market and could quote the prices of 200 items from memory without ever writing them down. Her younger brother, Keen, had been born when she was 2 and had been the closest person to her in the world for 17 years. Keen had been a sickle cell child, genotype SS. Their mother had not known her own genotype before the marriage, and their father had not known his, and Sunday and Beatrice had been told for the first time by a doctor in a public hospital in Onitsha when Keen was 9 months old and screaming through his fourth crisis that they should not have had children with each other. That they should not have had children with each other. The doctor had said it kindly. It had not made it less devastating. Keen had lived. He had spent more nights in hospitals than most adults will spend in their lives. He had learned to read in a pediatric ward. He had been a quick and quiet boy with their father's careful hands. He had wanted to be an engineer. He had taken the JAMB at 16 and scored 278 and been offered a place at UNN. He had not taken the place. In June of the year he was supposed to start, he had developed an acute chest syndrome that came on faster than the local hospital could respond to. They had transferred him to the University College Hospital. In Ibadan, Nneka, 19, and in her second year at the University of Lagos, had taken 3 buses across the country to get there. She had arrived at 6 in the morning. She had sat by his bed for the next 31 hours, holding his hand, watching his oxygen saturation slide down from 93 to 90 to 86. He had died at 1:10 on the afternoon of the second day. He had been 17 years old. She had walked out of the ward and sat down on the bench outside it and made a promise to him that she had told nobody else for the next 15 years. She had promised him she was going to spend the rest of her life making sure no other family in Nnewi had to bury a 17-year-old boy because of a disease that science already understood and had simply not finished translating into a cure. She had transferred to medicine at Lagos. She had completed her MBBS at 24. She had been awarded a Commonwealth Scholarship to Imperial College London at 26. She had returned to Nigeria at 29 with a PhD in molecular medicine and a co-authored paper in Nature on the genetics of JHS variants in West African populations. She had met Chief Tobe Eze at a conference in Abuja 2 months after she came home. He had told her on their third date that her mind was the most beautiful thing about her. She had believed him. She opened her eyes. Sister Tola was watching her. Sister. Yes, madame. What is the policy in this hospital about incident reports? They are filed in the medico-legal office. They are time-stamped. They are kept on the patient's record for 7 years. I see. I have already filed one, madame. Nneka looked at her. This morning at 6:14, before my shift ended. For the first time since the boy had been born, Nneka Obi-Eze smiled. It was a very small smile. It did not last very long, but it was there. Thank you, sister. Madame, may I sit? Please. Sister Tola sat on the chair Madame Gozi had vacated. She folded her hands on her lap. Madame, I have worked in this hospital for 22 years. I have seen many things. Some I cannot tell you, but I will tell you this. When a man treats his wife the way your husband treated you yesterday, there is always a reason he is in a hurry. Men like that do not become brave overnight. Someone has told him he can win quickly. So I will ask you, only because I am old and you are tired.
Do you have a lawyer?
Nneka was quiet for a moment. Sister, I have had a lawyer since I was 23. Good. I have had a company since I was 23. Good, madame. My lawyer's name is Lola Dada. She is a senior advocate of Nigeria. Her firm is at Heritage Place in Ikoyi. I am going to ask you, sister, if I may use your phone. Sister Tola handed it over without a word, while Nneka was dialing the number she had memorized 8 years ago, and never once in her marriage spoken aloud. Two things were happening elsewhere in Lagos. The first was that Saad Coker was sitting at the breakfast room of the Eco Hotel, eating eggs Florentine and posting a single photograph to her Instagram story. It was a photograph of her own hand resting on a polished marble breakfast table. On her wrist was a slim gold bangle. Around her neck, just visible at the bottom of the frame, was a strand of antique pearls. A single line of caption ran across the bottom of the image: New chapter loading. The second was that Madame Gozi-Eze, having left the hospital, had instructed Bashir to drive her directly to Banana Island, where she had let herself into her son's house with the key she still kept on her own ring, walked up to her daughter-in-law's dressing room, opened the top drawer of the Burr walnut cabinet, and discovered that the small velvet pouch she had been intending to retrieve was empty. The necklace was gone. She stood for a long moment in the silence of the dressing room, staring down at the empty pouch in her hand. She was a woman who did not say curse words. She did not learn to say one now. But something inside her went very still and very cold, and she walked out of the room without closing the drawer, and she went downstairs and called her son. Tabena,
Ama, ama, ama.
where is the necklace? What necklace? My mother's pearls. Where are they? There was a pause on the other end of the line. They are with Sade. Tabena. It is fine, Mama. Nneka would have lost them. She never wore them. I gave them to Tabena. Listen to me. I want you to come to this house right now. I want you to bring those pearls. I want you to tell me what you have actually done. And I want you to do it before I have to find out from someone else. She hung up the phone. She did not yet know that the daughter-in-law she had just told to pack and return a necklace had not in fact taken the necklace. She did not yet know that the necklace had left the house 6 weeks earlier in the pocket of a Tom Ford suit. She did not yet know that the photograph her own son's mistress had posted that morning, one of the slim gold bangle and the just visible strand of antique pearls, was being screenshotted at this very moment by 3 different relatives of hers in Onitsha and forwarded to her oldest sister. She would find out within the next 45 minutes. She did not know it yet. But the ground was already moving under her feet. The phone in Nneka's hand connected on the third ring. Lola Dada speaking. Lola, it is Nneka. A pause. Where are you? Reddington. Suite 4011, are the children alive? Yes. Are you? Yes. Tell me what happened. Nneka, it took 6 minutes. Lola Dada did not interrupt once. When Nneka was finished, there was a silence on the line, and then Lola said 5 words. I am on my way. She was a small woman, Lola Dada, 5'2", 54 years old, Yoruba by birth, called to the Nigerian bar in 1996, made senior advocate in 2018. She wore plain sots and reading glasses on a thin gold chain around her neck. She did not have children by choice. She had been married once, briefly in her 20s, to a man who had assumed her career would shrink to fit his. She had corrected the assumption by filing for divorce on their second wedding anniversary, and she had not remarried. She had taken Nneka Obi as a client when Nneka was 23 years old and walking into a law firm in Ikoyi with her first paycheck from her residency clenched in one hand, asking, in a voice that was half embarrassed and half determined, whether the firm could help her register a company in her own name before her family started asking her about marriage. Lola had registered the company. Lola had also, 8 years later, drafted a side letter that Toby A's had signed without reading on a Tuesday afternoon in October of the year he wanted his wife to indemnify alone. She arrived at Reddington Hospital at 11:40 that morning, carrying a leather briefcase and a slim folder of documents. She nodded to Sister Tola. She sat down in the chair by the bed. She looked at her client. Tell me what you want, Nneka. Nneka looked at the babies. The boy was awake now, his small dark eyes searching the ceiling with the unfocused gravity of a child who has not yet decided whether the world deserves his attention. The girl was nursing on her chest. I want my children safe, I want my work protected, and I want him to learn what it cost to take a person for granted. That is three things. Yes, all three are possible. The third one will hurt him. I know. It will hurt him in front of his mother. I know. It will hurt him publicly enough that he will not recover his standing in this city in his lifetime. Nneka was silent for a long moment. She thought about Keen. She thought about the bench outside the pediatric ward at UCH Ibadan. She thought about the morning Tobe had asked her to marry him on the beach at Alashe, when he had told her that her mind was the most beautiful thing about her, and she had believed him. Lola. Yes, do it. Lola Dada nodded once. She opened her case. She took out a small recorder, set it on the bedside table, and pressed record. Mrs. Obi-Eze, I am going to take a formal statement now. Yes. I want you to understand that from this moment forward, every conversation you have with your husband, his lawyer, his mother, his mistress, or anyone associated with him will be either witnessed or recorded by me or by someone working for me. Do you understand? Yes. I am going to ask you a series of questions about the side letter you signed on October the 7th, 2019. Then I am going to ask you about your company. Then I am going to ask you about the contract you signed in Zurich on November the 13th of this year. Are you ready? Yes. All right, let us begin. They worked for 2 hours. Sister Tola moved the babies to a quieter corner of the room and brought tea. Nneka spoke slowly and carefully, with the precision of a scientist explaining methodology. Lola Dada took notes. By 1 in the afternoon, they had a complete picture, and Lola was closing her briefcase, and Nneka was nursing her daughter again, and the city of Lagos was going about its day with no idea what was being assembled on the 4th floor of a hospital on Victoria Island. Before Lola left, she did one more thing. She handed Nneka a small white card. This is a doctor at the Sickle Cell Foundation, Nigeria. She is a friend. When you are well enough, I want you to call her. The work you are about to do, the work that is in that contract, is going to need partners on the ground. They will help you find the families. Nneka turned the card over in her hand. My brother. I know about your brother, Nneka. You told me about him on the day you registered the company. Do you remember? I remember. That is why I am still your lawyer. She closed her briefcase and left. Nneka was discharged from Reddington Hospital 3 days later, on the morning of the 21st of November, accompanied by Sister Tola Sani, who had taken 3 days of her own leave to drive her home. Bashir, who had been instructed by Madame Gozi to collect his employer's wife, was not at the hospital. The driver who had come was a man Nneka had never seen before, a man employed by Lola Dada's firm named Aliyu, who said good morning to her in a quiet voice and who carried both babies' car seats to the SUV with a gentleness that suggested he had children of his own. She did not go to Banana Island. She went, instead, to a serviced apartment in Ikoyi that Lola Dada had reserved in the firm's name 2 days earlier, on a quiet street called Glover Road, in a building where the security desk knew not to give out any information about the residents. Her mother, Beatrice, had flown in from Ninoe the previous evening. She was waiting in the apartment with a pot of pepper soup on the stove. She did not say anything when Nneka came in. She took one of the babies from the car seat. She held him for a long time. Then she looked at her daughter and said, in Igbo, only 4 words, I should have come. Nneka did not answer her. She put the second car seat down on the floor and sat on the sofa and put her face in her hands, and for the first time in 3 days, she cried. She cried until her mother came over and sat next to her and put one hand on her back and held it there without speaking, the way Beatrice had held her on the bench outside the pediatric ward 15 years earlier when the doctor had come out and told them about Keen. After a while, she stopped crying. She wiped her face on her sleeve. She said, Inigbo, do you remember what I promised him? Her mother said, I remember. Nneka said, I am going to keep it. Her mother said, I know you are. The next day was a Saturday. By Saturday afternoon, three things had happened in the Eze household at Banana Island. The first was that Tobe had brought Sede Coker home and installed her in the guest suite on the second floor. He had not yet told his mother. He had told his head of security, who had told the cook, who had told one of the cleaners, who had told her sister, who had told someone she did not know was a journalist. By 6 in the evening, a short item with no names attached had appeared on a Lagos society blog about a quote-unquote prominent oil and gas chairman and his new quote-unquote business partner moving into the family residence on Banana Island while his wife was still recovering in hospital. The item had 3,000 likes by Saturday night. The second was that Madame Gozi had stopped speaking to her son. She had not packed her things. She had not gone home to Onitsha. She had simply stopped speaking to him. When he came into the dining room, she walked out. When he asked her a question, she did not answer. She continued to live in the house. She continued to oversee the staff. She continued to take her meals at the long mahogany table she had eaten at for 40 years. She simply did not look at her own son. The third was that Toby's lawyer, a man named Femi Adelaja, had called Lola Dada's office on Friday afternoon and been told that Mrs. Obi-Eze was unavailable and that all further communication should be in writing. Femi Adelaja had not liked this answer. He had told his client. Tobe had not liked it either. He had told Femi to file the divorce petition at Ikoyi High Court on Monday morning, as planned, and to make sure the press got a copy of it before noon. He had no idea his entire situation had inverted. Before we go on, I want you to do something. Take a moment. Look out the window of wherever you are watching from right now. Tell me in the comments. What is the city outside your window? What is the country? Where in the world are you witnessing this from? I want to know. Because the next part of this story is the part where the silent woman starts to speak Kik, and I want to know how far her voice is about to carry. Now, back to the apartment on Glover Road. By the following Tuesday, Nneka had done 4 things. She had nursed her children. She had slept 11 hours in a row for the first time in 5 days. She had spoken on the phone for an hour and 20 minutes with the friend Lola Dada had recommended at the Sickle Cell Foundation Nigeria, a pediatric hematologist named Dr. Ifinyi, who had cried, briefly, when Nneka explained what was about to happen and what the licensing contract meant for the families on her waiting list. And she had agreed, in a calm and deliberate phone call to Lola, that she was ready. Lola scheduled the meeting for Friday morning at 9. Heritage Place, Ikoyi, 42nd floor, the firm's main conference room. She instructed her clerk to send formal notice to Femi Adelaja's office that Mrs. Obi-Eze would be present and would prefer to meet rather than litigate. She did not mention what would be discussed. Femi Adelaja, reading the notice in his office on Wednesday morning, did not understand what he was looking at. He had been informed by his client that Mrs. Obi-Eze had no resources, no representation of consequence, and no will to fight. He had been told the meeting would either result in a quick signature or in a litigation. His client would win without breaking stride. He read the notice, the name of the senior advocate, and went very still in his chair for approximately 10 seconds. Then he called his client seconds. Then he called his client. Sir, yes. There is one detail I wanted to raise before we go in on Friday. What detail? Your wife has retained Lola Dada. Tobe was quiet for a moment. The Lola Dada? Yes. From Heritage Place? Yes. How did she afford Lola Dada? I do not know, sir. I am still establishing the context. There was a longer silence on the line. Femi, yes. I want to know who her client list is. I want to know what cases she has won in the last 3 years, and I want to know what she does not know yet that we do. I will look into it tonight. Good. He hung up. He did not yet know that the answer to his last question was effectively 0. Lola Dada knew everything. He knew nothing. The only person sitting in that conversation who did not have the entire map already laid out in front of her was Obi-Eze. He just had not been told yet. He spent Wednesday afternoon at the courts. He had a very good game. On Thursday evening, the day before the meeting, Madame Obi-Eze did something she had not done in 8 years. She walked out of her son's house without telling him where she was going. She had Bashir drive her to the apartment on Glover Road. She had asked her own brother in Onitsha to find the address, which he had done in 40 minutes. Because the family had connections and because there were no secrets in Lagos that survived the right phone call. She rang the doorbell at 6:20 in the evening. Nneka's mother, Beatrice, answered. She did not let Madame Gozi in. The two women regarded each other across the threshold for a long moment, and then Beatrice said, "Inigbo, please wait here." She closed the door. She went to find her daughter. Nneka came to the door. She did not open it the rest of the way. She stood in the gap. "Mama, Nneka, may I come in? Nneka, Mama, I am not signing anything. I am not discussing anything. I am not coming to Banana Island. If you have something to say to me, you can say it tomorrow morning at Heritage Place. My lawyer will be there. Your son's lawyer will be there. Your son will be there. If you wish, you may be there too." She started to close the door. "Nneka, the pearls. Mama, I went to look for them the day I left the hospital. I know you did. They are not in the cabinet." "No, Mama, they are not. Do you know where they are?" Nneka looked at the older woman for a long moment. "You will find out at the meeting tomorrow, Mama." She closed the door. Madame Gozi stood on the doorstep for a full minute. Then she turned and went back to the car. Bashir did not ask where she wanted to go next. He simply drove. He drove her along Awolowo Road, past the supermarkets and the boutique hotels and the small Lebanese restaurants, and out towards Falomo Bridge. She should tell him to stop. He kept driving. He went all the way around the island. By the time they returned to Banana Island, it was 9 in the evening, and she had not said a single word. She got out of the car at the gate. She did not go into her son's house. She went, instead, to the small guest cottage at the back of the compound, where she had stayed during the building works the year before her husband died, and she let herself in with her own key. And she sat on the edge of the small white bed in the small white room, and she stayed there for a long time. She was beginning to understand that whatever was going to happen the next morning at Heritage Place was going to be worse than anything she had imagined. She did not yet know how much worse. But she had been a woman in Lagos society for 46 years, and she could feel when a tide was about to turn. She slept very badly. The meeting was scheduled for 9 in the morning. It started at 9:17 because Obi-Eze was late and because Femi Adelaja had been waiting in the lobby for 15 minutes already, and because Saad Koker, who had insisted on attending, had taken longer than expected to dress. They walked into the conference room together. Tobe in a charcoal Brunello Cucinelli suit, Femi in dark navy, Sadie in a cream acris jacket and the antique pearls, looped twice around her neck so the strand sat high on her collarbone, exactly where Madame Obi-Eze had worn them on the day of her own wedding photograph in 1976. Madame Gozi was already in the room. She had come on her own. She had not told her son she was coming. She sat at the far end of the conference table with her hands folded on the polished wood, and she looked at the necklace around the neck of the woman walking in with her son, and something in her face went very still. Tobe did not see her at first. He saw instead his wife. Nneka was sitting in the middle of the table on the side facing the windows, with Lola Dada to her right and a junior associate to her left. She was wearing a deep green wool dress that Lola had selected for her, and well cut, with her hair pulled back in a low knot. She did not look like a woman who had given birth 11 days earlier. She did not look like a woman who had been served divorce papers in a recovery suite. She looked exactly like what she had always been and what nobody in that room except Lola Dada had bothered to see. She looked like a scientist. "Good morning," she said. "Nneka, Please sit down, he sat. Sade sat to his left. Femi sat to his right. Femi opened a folder. He cleared his throat. Mrs. Ease, my client is prepared to offer a settlement of 200 million Naira, full custody of the minor children with monthly visitation rights for my client, and a structured payment plan for child support based on his current declared income. In return, you will sign the divorce petition as filed, waive any claims to the marital home, and execute a non-disclosure agreement regarding the circumstances of the separation. The offer is generous. Nneka did not look at him. She looked at her husband. Tobe, before we go any further, I want you to look at your mother. Tobe blinked. He turned his head. He saw Madame Gozi at the far end of the table. He went very still. Mama! She did not answer him. Mama, why are you? I was invited, she said. Her voice was quiet. It was a voice Nneka had never heard her use before. Mrs. Data's office called me yesterday afternoon. They said I would want to be here. Tobe's eyes went to Lola. Lola did not move. Tobe, Nneka said, I want you to do one more thing before we begin. I want you to look at the necklace your friend is wearing. He turned. He looked at Sade. He looked at the pearls. He looked at his mother again. For a single long second, he did not seem to understand what he was being shown. Then he did. His face did something that Nneka had never seen it do before. It was not an expression, exactly. It was the absence of one. It was the small, flat blankness of a man whose mind had momentarily disconnected from the room he was sitting in. Sade. Yes. Take them off. What? Take them off. Now, Tobe, what are you? Take them off, Sade. She reached up to her neck, slowly, and unhooked the clasp and let the pearls slip down into her hand. She put them on the table. They lay there, a small white coil on the dark wood, in front of all of them. Madame Gozi did not move. She did not even look at the necklace. She looked at her son. She looked at him for the longest time she had looked at anyone in his life. And then she made a small sound in her throat, very soft, which had no word equivalent in any language Nneka spoke, but which had the weight of a curtain falling. Lola, Nneka said, please proceed. Lola Dada opened her own folder. Mr. Adalaja, before I respond to your client's offer, I would like to introduce 5 documents into the record. They are also being delivered as we speak to your office by courier so that you and your client have the chance to verify their authenticity in real time. She set the first document on the table. Document 1, a certificate of incorporation issued by the Corporate Affairs Commission of Nigeria, dated June the 11th, 2017. The company is named Neogenics Limited. It is a Lagos-registered private limited company. The sole shareholder and the sole director is Mrs. Nneka Obi, registered under her maiden name, at the address of her late father's house in Noe. The company was incorporated 4 years before her marriage to Mr. Ease. Femi Adalaja picked up the certificate. His face was carefully neutral, but his eyes moved very quickly down the page. Document 2. She set down a thick-bound document. This is the master licensing agreement between Neogenics Limited and Helvetica Genomics AG, a Swiss biotechnology company headquartered in Zug. The agreement licenses to Helvetica the sub-Saharan African clinical adaptation rights and the West African haplotype biomarker panel intellectual property developed by my client over the past 8 years. The total value of the agreement, including milestone payments and royalties, is 750 billion Naira. The upfront payment of 150 billion Naira has already been received and is in the operational account of Neogenics Limited at Citibank, Nigeria, where it has been since Tuesday morning of last week. The room was completely silent. Femi Adalaja was no longer looking carefully neutral. He was reading the agreement now, page by page, with the speed of a man trying to find a fact that would save him. Document 3. She set down a slim document, 6 pages, with a navy ribbon binding it on the left edge. This is a side letter executed on October the 7th, 2019, between Chief Tabena Eze and Mrs. Nneka Obi-Eze. The letter is signed by both parties. It is notarized. A duplicate original is on file with the Lagos State Ministry of Justice. The letter was drafted at the request of Mr. Ease in connection with a spousal indemnity my client provided to Stanbic IBTC Bank for an 80 billion Naira loan facility your client requested for the acquisition of an petroleum operating license. She paused. The side letter contains 3 clauses. Clause 1 severs all intellectual property developed by either spouse during the marriage from the marital estate. Clause 2 provides that, in the event of a divorce petition filed by Mr. Ease without provable fault on the part of Mrs. Ease, or in the event of substantiated marital misconduct on the part of Mr. Ease shall pay to Mrs. Ease a sum equal to 40% of his then current net personal worth as liquidated damages in compensation for the financial risks Mrs. Ease underwrote in indemnifying the loan. Clause 3 contains a non-disclosure provision which expires automatically upon either the filing of the petition or the substantiation of misconduct, whichever comes first. Tobe was staring at the document. His mouth was slightly open. I did not sign that. You signed it, sir. I did not read that clause. You signed every page, sir. I have the originals. I want to see it. She passed on him the original. He looked at the last page. His own signature was on it, in his own black ink, beside Nneka's, beside the seal of the notary public, beside the date. He did not say anything. Document 4. She set down a thin file. This is the incident report filed by Sister Tola Sani at Reddington Hospital on the morning of November the 18th at 6:14. It describes in clinical detail the visit your client made to Suite 4 Thiwa 111 at approximately 4 o'clock that morning, 47 minutes after his wife had undergone an emergency cesarean section under general anesthetic, while she was still receiving intravenous magnesium for postpartum eclampsia prophylaxis. It documents that he served her with divorce papers in a state of significant medical incapacity. It is signed. It is time-stamped. It is on file with the hospital's medico-legal office, and a certified copy has been provided to my firm. She paused. It will be appended to any litigation we file, Mr. Adelaja, as will the audio recording which exists of Madame Obi-Eze's visit to Suite 4011 the following morning. Madame Obi-Eze closed her eyes very briefly. Document 5. Lola set down a thick file, the thickest of the 5. This is a 6-month forensic trace of payments from accounts associated with your client or with entities owned or controlled by your client to accounts associated with Miss Sade Coker. It includes transfers of school fees for Miss Coker's younger sister at a secondary school in Ibadan, an apartment in Lekki Phase 1, a deposit on a Mercedes G-Wagon registered in Miss Coker's name, payments to a luxury jewelry house in Lagos, which is in the process of confirming by separate affidavit that one of the items purchased was the antique pearl necklace now sitting on this table. The trace covers the period from April through October of this year. It establishes, to the standard required by Nigerian matrimonial law, substantiated marital misconduct by your client throughout the period prior to the filing of his divorce petition. Which means, Mr. Adelaja, that clause 2 of the side letter has been triggered. The room was silent for so long that the air conditioning click was audible. Toby was no longer looking at any of the documents. He was looking at his mother. She was looking at the pearls on the table. She did not look at her son. Femi Adelaja put down the licensing agreement. He took off his glasses. He cleaned them slowly on the corner of his pocket square, which Nneka recognized as the gesture of a competent lawyer who needed 20 seconds to organize his thinking before he spoke. Madame Counsel. Yes, Mr. Adelaja. What does my client owe? 40% of his net personal worth at the time of filing. We have had his assets independently appraised. His current net worth, including Ease Energy C shareholdings, the Banana Island residence, the Lekki commercial property, the Aston Martin DB11, the Range Rover, the offshore investment portfolios in his last sworn affidavit to Stanbic IBTC, and the Onitsha Land Bank registered in his name, comes to approximately 25 billion Naira. 40% of that is 10 billion naira. She paused. Payable in 90 days. Or we file in court. The side letter and the incident report and the financial trace become part of a public record, and my client pursues additional damages for emotional distress, coercion, and abandonment during medical incapacity. We are also prepared to refer the financial trace to the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission for review of the corporate funds disbursed without board approval, which I am informed by my forensic colleague includes approximately 350 million naira in payments to Miss Coker that were routed through Eze Energy's marketing budget. Said Coker, who had not spoken since the meeting began, said very quietly, "I want my own lawyer." "You will need one," Lola said. She did not look at her. Tobe Ease put his hands flat on the table. He looked down at them. He looked at his own wedding ring, which he was still wearing, for a reason he was not entirely sure of at this moment. "Nneka, yes. Why did you not tell me?" She looked at him for a long time. "Tobe, which part?" "Any part. The company, the contract, the side letter." "I did try to tell you about the company once. It was in our second year of marriage. You laughed and asked whether I was running a school project. I never raised it again. That is not. You asked me, in front of your friends at the dinner table at Eco, whether the basement was where I went to do my hobby. You asked me, in front of my own mother, at our wedding rehearsal, whether I was going to keep up the act of being a serious scientist after the wedding, or whether I would finally relax. You told me, 3 months ago, when I came home late from the airport, because I had been in a meeting that ran 6 hours, that if I wanted to play at being a businesswoman, I should at least find a real one to mentor me. I did not tell you, Toby. I did not tell you because you stopped being someone I told things to. You stopped being that person a long time ago." He did not answer. She leaned forward slightly. Her voice did not rise. It got quieter. "You are a man who looks at his wife on the day she gives birth to his children and sees an account to close. You did not even know what was in the basement, Toby. You did not know because you did not ask. You did not ask because you did not care. You did not care because you decided, very early in this marriage, that I was not the kind of person who could surprise you. That was your mistake. It is not a mistake I made you make. It is one you made all by yourself." She straightened. "I am not taking anything from you that is not already legally mine. I am not punishing you for leaving. I am charging you for the 8 years you spent in a house with a woman whose mind you decided not to know." She looked at Lola. "We are finished here." Lola nodded. She closed her folder. The junior associate to her left closed his. Nneka stood up. Her wound under the dress pulled at her abdomen, and she felt it, but she did not let her face change. She walked to the door. At the door she paused. She turned back. She looked at Madame Ngozi at the far end of the table. "Mama." Madame Ngozi looked up. "The necklace is yours. It has always been yours. I never took it from the drawer. The day after the wedding, I put it back in the case it came in, and I left it there. It has not moved from your house in 8 years. The person who moved it from the house 3 weeks ago was your son. He moved it to a hotel suite in Lekki where his guest was staying. If you wish to know which hotel, my lawyer can provide the receipt." She turned to leave. "Goodbye, Mama." She walked out. Lola followed her. The junior associate followed Lola. The door closed behind them. In the conference room, Femi Adelaja sat with his hands in his lap and looked at the table. Said Coker did not move. Tobe Aze put his face in his hands. Madame Gozi-Eze stood up. She did not look at her son. She walked the length of the conference table. She passed the pearls. She did not pick them up. She walked to the door. She paused there. She turned her head, just enough to be heard, but not enough to see her son. "Tobena." "Mama, I am going home to Onitsha tomorrow. I will be living there from now on. The house in Banana Island is yours. You may keep it. You may sell it. You may give it to whichever woman is currently sleeping in it. I do not care. I will not be visiting again." She paused. "You will pay this woman what you owe her. You will not contest. You will sign whatever Mrs. Dada puts in front of you, and then you will not contact me, and you will not bring this woman to my house, and you will not telephone me when you are drunk and want to apologize. There is no apology, Tabena. There is only what you have already done, and there is what I will allow myself to forget in the years I have left, which is not very much. She walked out. In the elevator down to the lobby, Nneka was quiet. Lola was quiet. The junior associate was quiet. The numbers on the small digital display counted down from 42 to 1. When the doors opened, Nneka stepped out into the lobby of Heritage Place. She walked across the polished marble floor. She passed the security desk and the small flower stand and the coffee cart where a woman was selling small chin-chin in paper bags. She walked out through the revolving doors and into the November sun on Kingsway Road, and she stopped, just for a moment, on the wide stone steps, and she looked up at the sky. The sky was the very pale blue of a Lagos morning before the Harmattan. There was a single thin streak of cirrus high above the city. A horn sounded somewhere on Awolowo Road. A street vendor called out the price of plantain chips. A small boy ran across the pavement holding a kite that had no wind. Nneka closed her eyes for 2 seconds. When she opened them, she looked down at the steps in front of her, at her own shoes, and she said, very quietly, in Igbo, only one sentence. It was a sentence she had not said aloud in 15 years. It was a sentence she had said only once, on a bench outside a pediatric ward at UCH Ibadan, at a few minutes past 1 in the afternoon, on a day she would not forget for the rest of her life. It was a sentence she said now, in the bright sunlight of a different morning, in a different decade, on the steps of a building her brother had never lived to see. It was the sentence she had whispered to him after he died. She said it once. She did not say it again. And then she walked down the steps and got into the car and went home to her children. If you have made it this far in the story, I am going to ask you the smallest favor in the world. Hit the subscribe button if you have not yet. Like the video. Share it with one woman in your life who you have seen made small by someone who did not deserve her. Comment one word witness. Tell me where you are watching from, because we are not finished. There is still the part where the man learns what it actually cost. 6 weeks later, on the morning of the 7th of January, 10 billion Naira was wired in 3 tranches from accounts associated with Chief Nneka Obi-Eze to the operational account of Neogenics Limited at Citibank, Nigeria. The transfers were complete by 12:40 in the afternoon. Lola Dada's office acknowledged receipt by email at 1:15. Tobe Eze had paid. He had not contested. He had not litigated. He had not, in the end, even attempted to negotiate. On the day after the meeting at Heritage Place, Femi Adalaga had advised him that he had 2 options. He could sign the settlement as presented, or he could spend the next 2 years in a courtroom watching the financial trace, the incident report. The side letter and the audio recording of his mother being asked to leave a hospital room become a public file accessible to every business journalist in Lagos. He had taken approximately 90 seconds to decide. He signed. By the end of November, the share price of Eze Energy plc on the Nigerian exchange had fallen by 38%. By the middle of December, it had fallen by another 12%. 2 institutional investors had pulled their lines of credit. A planned secondary offering for January was quietly withdrawn. The Stanbic IBTC consortium had not called the 80 billion Naira loan, but they had renegotiated the terms, and the new terms were not friendly. Tobe had spent the month of December trying to raise replacement capital and had been told, politely, by 3 different banks in 3 different countries that there was a small problem of optics they were currently not prepared to underwrite. Said Coker had left him on the 8th of December. She did not leave him for another man, which would have been the easier story. She left him because she had been raised by her mother to recognize a sinking position, and she recognized one now. She moved out of the house in Banana Island the same week. She returned the Mercedes G-Wagon. She kept the apartment in Lekki because Tobe had paid the lease through August and it would have been wasteful to walk away. She did not contact him again. By February, she was working at a competing firm in Victoria Island with a small line in her bio about her previous role as head of strategy at EZ Energy, which she did not elaborate on at interviews. The pearls had stayed at Heritage Place. Lola Dada had them delivered, in their original case, to Madame Ngozi Eze in Onitsha by registered courier on the Monday after the meeting. Madame Ngozi had signed for them at her front door. She had not opened the case, she had set it on a shelf in her own dressing room, and she had not, as far as anyone in her household could tell, looked at it since. Madame Ngozi did not return to Lagos. She had, however, on a Sunday morning in the second week of December, instructed her younger sister to telephone Lola Dada's office and request the address of the apartment on Glover Road. The address had been given. The following Wednesday, a small package had arrived at the apartment, addressed to Dr. Nneka Obi, with no return label and no accompanying letter. Inside the package was a small velvet pouch. Inside the pouch was a single Igbo proverb written in black ink on a folded piece of cream paper in handwriting Nneka recognized. The proverb said, "In Igbo, the river that forgets its source will dry." There was nothing else. Nneka had read the note. She had folded it carefully along the original crease. She had placed it back in the pouch. She had put the pouch in the same drawer where she kept her own mother's wedding, photograph, and her brother's primary school report card. She had not written back. But she had not thrown it away either, and there was a small difference between those two things, which she had decided she would allow to stand without explanation for as long as it needed to. On the 2nd of February, the Nneka Obi Foundation for Sickle Cell Equity was registered with the Corporate Affairs Commission. It was funded with an initial endowment of 7.5 billion Naira, drawn from the upfront payment on the Helvetica licensing contract. Its mission was to provide free genotype testing in 5 Nigerian states, financial assistance to families of children with sickle cell disease, scholarships for young Nigerians pursuing graduate research in hematology, and pilot funding for the first wave of clinical adaptation trials of gene therapy treatment in West African populations. Its chair was Dr. Nneka Obi. Its honorary co-chair, listed on the small bronze plaque that would be installed in the foundation's office in Yaba the following May, was a pediatric hematologist named Dr. Patricia Ifinyi, whose name had been on the small white card Lola Dada had handed to Nneka in a hospital recovery suite 11 weeks earlier. The foundation's offices were on the second floor of a small building on Herbert Macaulay Way, 2 blocks from the National Institute for Medical Research, where the first West African cohort of the gene therapy adaptation trial would be enrolled the following October. The foundation's first staff hire was a research coordinator named Miss Kioma Okoli, who had lost her own younger sister to a sickle cell crisis at the age of 12. The foundation's second hire was an administrator named Mr. Sunday Igwe, who was Beatrice Obi's distant cousin from Nui, and who knew, the way Beatrice did, the price of every item in a small provisions stall. The foundation's third hire, made in March, was a recently retired maternity nurse named Sister Tola Sana, who joined as Director of Family Support Services. She had handed in her resignation at Reddington Hospital on the Monday after the meeting at Heritage Place. The hospital had thrown her a small farewell party. She had eaten a piece of cake. She had not told anyone the reason she was leaving. On the 3rd of March, Dr. Nneka Obi moved out of the apartment on Glover Road. She did not return to the house in Banana Island. She bought instead a small 4-bedroom house on a quiet street in Ikoyi, with a guava tree in the back garden and a study at the rear of the ground floor that she converted into a proper laboratory, with safety hoods and a centrifuge and a small biobank freezer and a desk by the window where she could see the garden when she looked up from her work. Her mother moved in with her. Beatrice Obi was 63 years old. She had not lived in Lagos before. She had not particularly wanted to, but her daughter had asked her, in a voice that was very quiet and very steady, whether she would consider coming, and Beatrice had said yes. The twins, who were now 4 months old, slept in a single nursery on the second floor, in two cribs pushed close together so that the boy could hear his sister breathing, and the girl could hear her brother. They had been given the surname Obi at the time of their birth registration, on Lola Dada's quiet legal advice, and they would not be changing it. Their first names were Ike and Oma, strength and beauty. Their mother had chosen the names herself at 6 in the evening of a Tuesday in November, sitting in a hospital bed with both of them sleeping on her chest, and she had not consulted anyone about the choice. On the evening of the foundation's launch, Nneka stood at a small podium in the rented ballroom of the Civic Center on Ozumba Mbadiwe, looking out at 300 guests. There were pediatric hematologists from UCH Ibadan and UNTH Enugu. There were representatives of Sickle Cell Foundation Nigeria. There were 2 officials from the National Biotechnology Development Agency. There were 6 families from Nnewi, including a couple who had lost a daughter in February at the age of 9. There were her old colleagues from Imperial College London who had flown in from Heathrow that morning. There was a small handful of journalists. There were no representatives of the Hez family. None had been invited. She gave a short speech. It was 4 minutes long. She did not write it down. She did not need to. She had been preparing for it for 15 years. She talked about her brother. She talked about the morning in 1998 when she had sat by his bed at UCH Ibadan and watched his oxygen saturation slide down from 93 to 86. She talked about the doctor who had come out into the corridor to tell her parents that he was sorry. She talked about her mother sitting beside her on a bench and not saying anything for an hour. She talked about Nigeria. She said this country bears the largest sickle cell burden in the world. She said 1 in 4 of us carries the trait. She said every year we lose about 150,000 children before their 5th birthday to a disease that science already understands and that we as a country have collectively decided to keep losing. She said this is not because we cannot. It is because we have not yet decided to. She said, my brother did not have to die. She said, the children sitting in the front row of this ballroom tonight do not have to die. She said, we are going to start telling them that. We are going to start telling their parents that. We are going to provide free genotype testing in the 5 states where the disease burden is highest. We are going to fund the first West African cohort of the gene therapy adaptation trial. We are going to make sure that the next generation of Nigerian scientists working on this problem do not have to leave the country to do their best work. We are going to keep doing this every year for as long as I am alive, and after that we are going to keep doing it longer. She paused. She said, before any of you ask anyone you love to marry you, please ask them what their genotype is. It is 2 letters and a piece of paper. It costs less than dinner. It is the single most important question a young Nigerian can ask the person they are about to spend their life with. And if you do not know your own, you find out before next Saturday. She paused again. She said, that is the speech. The room stood up. The applause went on for a long time. Beatrice Obi, sitting in the 2nd row, did not stand. She did not clap. She sat very still in her seat, and she watched her daughter at the podium, and her eyes shone wet in the warm light of the ballroom, and she did not blink for a long time, because she did not want anyone in that room to see her cry. She had not been able to come to the hospital on the morning Keen died. The buses had been delayed. She had arrived in Ibadan 8 hours after her daughter. She had walked into a ward where her son was already gone, and her daughter was sitting on a bench outside the door, refusing to come back in, and she had sat down next to her on that bench and put one hand on her daughter's back and held it there for an hour and not said anything. She watched her daughter at the podium 25 years later, and she thought, in Igbo, kept it, my child. You kept the promise. You kept it for him." She did not say it aloud. She did not need to. Later that night, after the guests had left and the caterers had packed up, and the small banner with the foundation's logo had been folded and put into a cardboard box, for the next event, Nneka drove home with her mother and the twins asleep in the car seat. She carried them upstairs one at a time, the boy first and the girl second, and she laid them in their cribs, and she stood for a few minutes between the two beds, watching them breathe. She put her hand very gently on her daughter's small, warm head. She said very quietly, "You are loved." She moved to her son's crib. She put her hand on his head. She said, "You are safe." She stood between them in the dim light of the nightlight. She said, "You will not have to make yourself smaller for anyone." She did not say anything else. She went downstairs. Her mother was already in bed. The house was quiet. She walked through the small kitchen and out through the back door, and stood on the lawn in the cool air of a Lagos February night, and looked up at the small handful of stars that were visible through the city light. She thought about her brother. She thought about the bench outside the pediatric ward. She thought about a man in a Tom Ford suit who had stood at the foot of her hospital bed and told her she came from nothing. She did not feel triumph. She did not feel anger. She felt mostly very tired in the calm, clean, tired way of a person who has done what she set out to do and who knows that what comes next is years of small, ordinary, repetitive work and who is ready for it. She went back inside. She locked the door behind her. She went upstairs to bed. In a guest cottage in Onitsha, a woman of 67 was sitting up in a small bed in a small white room. She had read a newspaper article that afternoon about the foundation launch. She had not told anyone she had read it. She had cut the article out of the paper with a small pair of nail scissors, and she had folded it twice, and she had put it in the drawer of the small bedside table next to her bed, next to a velvet pouch that had not been opened in 3 months. She turned off the light. She thought for a long time about a woman she had once stood over in a hospital recovery suite and demanded a necklace from. She did not know what she felt. She would not allow herself to know yet. But she understood, the way women of her generation understood things they could not say aloud, that the daughter-in-law she had spent 8 years failing to see had become, somewhere along the way, the only person in her family she still respected. She did not know what to do with that understanding. She was not sure she would do anything with it, but she knew it, and she knew it would not go away, and she knew that she would carry it with her now for whatever years she had left, and that it would be the small, constant cost of having waited too long to look. She closed her eyes. In Lagos, in a small bedroom in Ikoyi, the boy stirred briefly in his crib and then settled. The girl, in the crib next to his, did not stir at all. Their mother slept the deep, clean sleep of a woman who had finally put down something she had been carrying for a long time. Outside the window, the city went on with its noise and its lights and its slow, steady turning, and somewhere in the dark, a small bird called twice and then was quiet. And the night closed in around the house, and around the two small breathing children inside it, and around their mother, and held them. A note before you go. The legal mechanisms in this story, the spousal indemnity side letter, the premarital company, registered with the Corporate Affairs Commission in a maiden name, the intellectual property severance clause, the documented incident report at a teaching hospital are real instruments used every day by Nigerian senior advocates and corporate counsel. Nigerian matrimonial law varies significantly depending on whether a marriage was contracted under the Marriage Act or under customary law, and what protects a woman in Lagos may not look the same in Kano or in a village in Anambra. If anything in this story made you think about your own marriage or your own family, please do not act on what you heard in a YouTube comment section. Sit down with a registered attorney from the Nigerian Bar Association who specializes in matrimonial property and ask them about side letters and premarital incorporation while you still have the time to put them in place. If you are a woman building anything in private, register it with the CAC under your maiden name and protect your work the way Professor Ada Cole would have wanted you to. The Sickle Cell Foundation Nigeria is real and is reachable through their offices in Idiaraba, Lagos, if you need genotype counseling. FIDA Nigeria, the Federation of International Women Lawyers, takes referrals for women in matrimonial distress and is reachable through their state chapters. I am not a Nigerian lawyer, and nothing in this story is legal advice. I am someone who wanted to tell a story about a quiet woman who kept a promise to her brother. If you take one thing from it, take this. Ask the person you love about their genotype before you ask them about the wedding.